The Gaza Strip is once again engulfed in flames. The world watches with bated breath as Israeli tanks roll into Rafah, their massive guns casting long shadows over the beleaguered city. Airstrikes, merciless and devastating, illuminate the night sky, leaving behind a trail of destruction and despair. The echoes of explosions reverberate through the streets, a constant reminder of the precariousness of life for the people of Rafah. This latest eruption of violence, sparked by a deadly attack on Israeli civilians, has catapulted the Israeli-Palestinian conflict back into the global spotlight. News agencies scramble to capture the unfolding chaos, broadcasting images of smoldering rubble and frantic medics tending to the wounded. World leaders express their concern, urging restraint and a return to dialogue, but their words seem to fall on deaf ears as the situation on the ground continues to deteriorate. The escalating violence in Rafah is not merely a localized conflict, it carries with it the potential to ignite a broader regional conflagration. The Gaza Strip, densely populated and impoverished, has long been a tinderbox, its residents caught in the crossfire of a seemingly intractable conflict. With each new outbreak of violence, the hope for a lasting peace, a future free from fear and bloodshed, dwindles further. The United States, a steadfast ally of Israel, finds itself in a familiar position, walking a diplomatic tightrope. On one hand, the Biden administration faces mounting pressure to condemn Israel's military actions, particularly the escalating civilian casualties, which have drawn sharp criticism from international human rights groups. On the other hand, the U.S. remains committed to Israel's security, recognizing its right to defend itself against perceived threats. This delicate balancing act is further complicated by the shifting political landscape in the region. The Abraham Accords, brokered by the Trump administration, have reshaped the geopolitical dynamics, fostering closer ties between Israel and several Arab states. These new alliances have emboldened Israel, some argue, leading to a more assertive and less conciliatory stance toward the Palestinians. The U.S. response to the current crisis in Rafah will have far-reaching implications. A strong condemnation of Israel's actions, while potentially appeasing some international actors and domestic critics, risks alienating a key ally in a volatile region. Conversely, unwavering support for Israel without acknowledging the plight of Palestinian civilians could further inflame tensions and undermine the U.S.'s standing in the Arab world. The Biden administration faces a difficult choice, one with no easy answers. Amidst the geopolitical maneuvering and diplomatic wrangling, it is easy to lose sight of the human cost of this conflict. Behind the statistics, the casualty figures splashed across news headlines lie shattered lives and broken families. Each airstrike, each bullet fired, leaves an indelible mark on the people of Rafah. Hospitals, already overwhelmed by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, are struggling to cope with the influx of casualties. Medical supplies are running low, and the constant threat of violence makes it dangerous for humanitarian aid to reach those in need. Children, the most vulnerable victims of this conflict, cower in fear as bombs rain down around them, their childhood stolen by the relentless cycle of violence. The psychological toll of this conflict is immeasurable. Trauma, grief, and despair permeate every aspect of life in Rafah. The constant fear of violence, the loss of loved ones, the destruction of homes and livelihoods, these are wounds that run deep and will take generations to heal. The international community's response to the escalating violence in Rafah has been a mix of condemnation, calls for restraint, and offers of humanitarian assistance. The United Nations Security Council has held emergency meetings, but its efforts to broker a ceasefire have been hampered by divisions among its permanent members. The Arab League has condemned Israel's military actions, calling for an immediate cessation of hostilities and a return to negotiations. European nations have expressed their concern over the escalating violence, urging both sides to exercise restraint and protect civilian lives. Some European leaders have been more critical of Israel's actions, condemning the disproportionate use of force and calling for an end to the occupation of Palestinian territories. However, concrete action from the international community has been limited, highlighting the challenges of resolving a conflict with such deep-rooted historical and political complexities. The international community's response to the crisis in Rafah underscores the limitations of traditional diplomacy in the face of intractable conflicts. While condemnations and calls for restraint may carry symbolic weight, they have proven insufficient to break the cycle of violence that has plagued the region for decades. A more proactive and coordinated approach, one that addresses the root causes of the conflict and prioritizes the protection of civilians, is urgently needed. The current escalation in Rafah is but the latest chapter in a long and bloody conflict. For decades, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been a source of global instability, defying countless attempts at resolution. The historical echoes of past wars, broken ceasefires, and failed peace initiatives weigh heavily on the present, casting a long shadow over any prospects for a lasting peace. The Oslo Accords, signed in the 1990s, raised hopes for a two-state solution. But the dream of an independent Palestinian state alongside Israel remains elusive. The expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, the continued blockade of Gaza, and the lack of trust between the two sides have created seemingly insurmountable obstacles to peace. The future of Rafah, and indeed the entire region, hangs in the balance. Will this latest eruption of violence be a turning point, a catalyst for a renewed push for peace? Or will it simply be another tragic chapter in a seemingly endless conflict? The answers to these questions lie not only in the hands of political leaders, but also in the hearts and minds of ordinary Israelis and Palestinians who yearn for a future free from violence and fear. As the dust settles on the latest round of fighting, a fragile ceasefire hangs precariously in the balance. The guns have fallen silent for now, but the underlying tensions that sparked this latest conflagration remain unresolved. The people of Rafah, weary from years of conflict and loss, dare to hope for a lasting peace, but their hopes are tempered by the bitter lessons of the past. The international community, having witnessed yet again the devastating consequences of this intractable conflict, must seize this opportunity to push for a meaningful and lasting resolution. This will require more than just words of condemnation or calls for restraint. It will demand a sustained and coordinated effort to address the root causes of the conflict. The road to peace will be long and arduous, but it is a journey that must be taken. The alternative, continued cycles of violence and bloodshed, is simply unacceptable. The people of Rafah, and indeed the entire region, deserve a future free from fear, a future where their children can grow up in peace and security. The time for action is now.